Do you want to be ahead of the game for the latest in arts, music, cuisine, and entertainment across the Middle East's most dynamic capital cities? Al Monitor is proud to launch our City Pulse newsletters, focused exclusively on local news, starting in Riyadh, Dubai, Istanbul, and Doha. Each week, our on-the-ground writers in these cities cover the latest cultural happenings and trends, so you have everything you need to know for the best local experiences. To subscribe for free, go to almonitor.com, that's al-monitor.com, and sign up on our newsletter page.
Welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief. I'm Adam Lucente. Today is Tuesday, April 28th, 2026. The United Arab Emirates announced on Tuesday it is leaving the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, aka OPEC, effective May 1st. The official Emirates news agency reported the move was in line with the UAE's economic vision, noting, quote, accelerated investment in domestic energy production, as well as its commitment to a responsible role in the global market. The agency mentioned disruptions in the Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, but said, quote, underlying trends point to sustained growth in global energy demand over the medium to long term. The agency reported the UAE would continue to bring, quote, additional production to market in a gradual and measured manner. You may be wondering what that all means, and we'll get to that, because this is a significant move. The UAE joined OPEC in 1967 and is a key member of the cartel. The Emirates is a top 10 oil producer in the world and also has the 7th largest natural gas reserves. The decision comes amid uncertainty surrounding the U.S.-Israel-Iran war and disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, where about a fifth of world oil and gas exports flow. The UAE has been targeted by Iran more than any other Gulf state has in the war, and vital energy facilities have been hit. In March, the UAE was forced to cut oil production by 45% to 1.89 million barrels per day. But is this a response to the market disruptions resulting from the war, part of the UAE's energy and economic diversification efforts, or something else entirely? And how will it impact OPEC and the wider market? In this episode, we'll be looking at the reasons the UAE left OPEC, how the move will affect the cartel, and what it all means for a region at war. Hearing from Al Monitor's business correspondents, Dutton and Samuel Wendel. Hope you enjoy. I first asked Jack Dutton, Al Monitor's senior business correspondent, about why the UAE made this decision. He said one motivation is an Emirati desire to have better control of its production and not be constrained by OPEC decisions. Take a listen.
There are several reasons why the UAE chose to leave OPEC. Some have been made public, while some have not been made public. When you look at what's been said on the record, the UAE's Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure released a statement announcing that the country would be leaving OPEC and the OPEC Plus group from May the 1st. And in that statement, they say, the decision reflects the UAE's long-term strategic and economic vision and evolving energy profile, including accelerated investment in domestic energy production, and reinforces its commitment to a responsible, reliable and forward-looking role in global energy markets, which is obviously quite vague. But what it means is that the UAE is one of the few members of OPEC with significant spare capacity. Before the US-Israel-Iran war, it was producing about 3.6 million barrels of oil per day, according to the International Energy Agency, which is roughly 12% of OPEC's total output. However, the country actually has a total capacity of 4.8 million barrels per day and has ambitions to produce more so it can bring in more revenues. That's at least 1.2 million barrels per day the UAE could be bringing to market if it wasn't in OPEC, because when it's in OPEC, it is constrained by output limits, and that is not set just by the UAE, that's set by the whole group, of which there are members which are more influential and leading, like Saudi Arabia, and we'll come back to that in a while. When you look at the main company in the UAE, which is responsible for this output, that's the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, ADNOC, it aims to accelerate its oil capacity to 5 million barrels per day by 2027, and that's a target which has been brought forward from its previous 2030 target. Abu Dhabi, including Mohammed Al Mazrui, the UAE's Minister of Energy and Infrastructure has long complained about the quota limits in OPEC and UAE's desire to produce more barrels. Furthermore, OPEC has become more fragmented in recent years following Qatar, because Qatar is like a major oil and gas, including LNG producer, decision to withdraw from the cartel in 2019, and this was amid a regional blockade of Qatar, and there were tensions and growing disagreements within the alliance. And coming back to Saudi Arabia, there's the growing economic and diplomatic tension between the UAE and Saudi Arabia, particularly among foreign policy differences in different countries across the Horn of Africa. And Saudi Arabia is OPEC's largest producer, so this also may have influenced Abu Dhabi's decision.
The Saudi angle is an interesting one indeed. We have seen the UAE take a harder stance against Iran in this war compared to other Gulf states, not to mention significant differences between Abu Dhabi and Riyadh on the conflicts in Yemen and Sudan in particular. I asked Samuel Wendel, Al Monitor's senior market research analyst, the same question. He said the UAE's decision to leave OPEC is tied to the effects of the rivalry, including differences over oil production, as well as other matters. Here's Samuel.
In the background of all this is the UAE-Saudi Arabia rift, which prior to the outbreak of the U.S.-Israel-Iran war on February 28th had been driving a lot of headlines. Abu Dhabi has flirted with the idea of leaving OPEC in the past amid tensions with Riyadh over production and other issues. But heading into 2026, this rivalry between Gulf neighbors was obviously spilling out further into the public eye, which ultimately set the stage for the UAE's OPEC membership to become a potential flashpoint. That rivalry is obviously not just limited to oil and gas production, as despite the Iran war and Hormuz crisis dominating the global spotlight, we've also seen this internal rift in the Gulf continue to loom large even during the last few weeks of hostilities. Case in point, earlier this month, the UAE asked Pakistan to repay a $3.5 billion loan, which has been seen as reflecting a growing frustration with Pakistan amid its deepening ties with Saudi Arabia, a move that prompted Riyadh actually to step in with fresh financial support. So this rift is, much bigger than oil, but, OPEC has become a casualty of it.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with what this all means for OPEC after this short break.
Today's transformation of the Middle East is at the center of global geopolitics. Whether you're an analyst, diplomat, executive, or academic, you need the best reporting and analysis to understand what's really happening on the ground and what it means for the world. Al Monitor is the award-winning independent leader in Middle East news. From Riyadh to Beirut, Abu Dhabi to Doha, and Baghdad to Tehran, our team of over 100 expert journalists report daily on the top stories driving the regional trends. Download our mobile app and subscribe to Al Monitor to follow what leaders and decision makers are reading every day. Go to almonitor.com, that's AL-MONITOR.com, and use promo code POD25, POD25, for a discount.
Okay, we're back. I also asked Samuel about how the exit of the UAE may impact OPEC itself. He said it's a big loss.
Well, this marks the highest profile departure from the organization to date, even more so than Qatar's exit in 2018. Last year, the UAE was OPEC's fourth largest producer behind Iran, and based on last year's reported output levels, the UAE's exit would remove roughly 11% of the group's total production. Now, this year, the war and the resulting Gulf crisis is obviously having a huge impact on key OPEC producers, as they are on both sides of this conflict. But looking beyond short-term impacts, this move by Abu Dhabi could mark a significant turning point for OPEC's influence and internal cohesion, as the U.S.-Israel-Iran war reshapes global energy markets. But you also have to consider the Venezuela situation, with the U.S. ousting President Nicolas Maduro earlier this year, and now holding sway over the OPEC members' oil industry. In the span of just a couple of months, the organization has now been dealt a series of shocks that could have long-term impacts. One thing to watch going forward, in my opinion, is the U.S.-UAE alignment on energy, as Abu Dhabi has eagerly engaged with President Donald Trump's energy agenda at a moment of record production in the United States.
And speaking of the war, I thought it would be worth going over the state of things in the Strait of Hormuz. Basically, traffic is not normal at all. Here's Jack Dutton with the latest.
Shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz is still very low, far below the normal levels. If you look at before the war erupted between the US, Israel, and Iran on February the 28th, we used to get between 130 to 140 ships crossing the strait daily. Now it's often in the single digits to a few dozen a week. You do get some ships which turn off their transponder systems, which is basically their radar, so they are not detected and manage to get through as a result to be more discreet, but generally it's been barely any ships pass, and the security risks remain very high because there's still many reports from the different maritime agencies of sea ships and vessels have been fired at. And the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, armed group in Iran, which is extremely influential, has said that it will seize ships which don't comply with their terms in terms of safe passage, and they've been asking for tolls through the strait to kind of recoup some of their losses Iran has made via damage inflicted by the US and Israel during the war. And still, the talks have fallen apart between the US and Iran, and they have not reached any sort of agreement about how to ensure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. What has complicated things more is that on April the 13th, the US Navy imposed a blockade of Iranian ports, which has created this dual blockade dynamic, which has made things even more kind of higher risk to some extent, with ships passing through and there being very few tankers moving through. Actually, today, a news story broke, which is the first laden liquefied natural gas tanker to transit the strait since the US-Israeli war with Iran started at the end of February. So Bloomberg and Reuters were reporting that a tanker called the Mubaraz, which is sailing under the Liberian flag, passed through the Strait of Hormuz, and it was kind of left the UAE's Dar's Island, and successfully passed through the Straits. And it was last seen in the Gulf on March the 30th before switching its transponder off, which obviously, as I said, is a common practice by ships to discreetly transit the strait. And the shipping data shows that the tanker is now off the west coast of India, and it is due to reach a Chinese port by mid-May. There's also reports suggesting that the tanker is managed by Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, who I've contacted to try and get additional confirmation for. So you are starting to see some tankers get through, but it's still a very, very small number. But this may be the start of a trend to start seeing more and more numbers, but I don't think it's going to be a fast recovery at this stage until the US and Iran come to an agreement which reassures all the shipping companies.
Thanks for listening to the Al Monitor Brief. Be sure to follow Al Monitor for more on the stories impacting the Middle East. Until next time, I'm Adam Lucente.